Hello and welcome to Addicted to Life, the interactive activity about drugs and teens. I'm Maya, and today we'll go on a journey together where you'll be active participants. Don't worry, I am not going to mislead you or scare you. I am going to be totally upfront with you. Together, we'll learn how to identify information that is crucial to your lives. What's true, what's fake, and ultimately, you will make your own decisions. So, let's begin. So first, I'd like to know how you started your day. All those who woke up in a good mood, press 1 on your keyboard or with the mouse. Those of you who woke up on the wrong side of the bed, please press 2. Okay then, you have 4 seconds. You see the results on the screen, and that raises a very interesting question. Danny, the screen is yours.
How many times have you woken up in the morning feeling that things just aren't going your way? That you're not good enough? That despite the cliches, life is full of problems and nothing like what you dreamed of? How do you solve this problem? How can you get rid of that depressing feeling that hits us sometimes? You can wait for it to go away, or you can wait for someone to come along and make you feel better. You can also wait for a miracle.
The world is full of solutions to the problem.
But in real life, we're not always winners, or in control, in sync with our surroundings, and not completely free. Basically, we're not always as happy as we wish we were. Most of us are okay with this and understand that life is complicated. But some people, instead of dealing with the complexities of life, look for shortcuts and quick fixes for a good mood, for confidence, for a sense of belonging, peace, and even for love.
My head deserves the very best. So when I'm down, or when life is just a little dull, I use happiness, the best pill out there. Happiness, the happy pill.
Does this make sense? Think about it. Maybe this pill happens to be called heroin, ecstasy, or maybe cannabis, weed, cocaine, inhalants.
I'm sure you've heard many stories about these substances. Today we'll try to deal with the information about these miracle cures. We'll deal with the facts and the lies and the real price of the quick solutions they provide.
And now I wish to hear your thoughts. Call it a short survey for starters. It's important you know that your identity is not recorded and your answers will remain anonymous. So you can answer honestly without fear of being exposed. By the way, there are no regrets. Once you've voted, it is not possible to change the vote. And please wait with your answer until we finish reading all the optional answers and the start of the stopwatch. Answers given before the stopwatch has been activated will not be received.
What grade are you in? 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, or 11th grade? Have you ever used cannabis, also known as marijuana, a joint, weed, or pot? Never, once, a few times, 3 to 5, or more than 5 times. Remember, your identity will remain anonymous. Have you ever used inhalants like gasoline aerosols, paint thinners, magic markers, etc. to get high? Have you ever used ecstasy or cocaine? Have you ever used opioids such as OxyContin, fentanyl, codeine, or heroin? How risky is it for people your age to use drugs? no risk, low risk, moderate risk, or high risk. What happens when you take drugs? You become happy, nothing, you become sad, or they affect everyone differently. How long does the effect of cannabis last? Less than 8 hours, up to 24 hours, up to 7 days, or up to 30 days? Are you going to use cannabis in the future? Absolutely yes, maybe, or absolutely not. If you find out that your brother or sister is using cannabis, will you be concerned it could harm their relationship with your parents? No, maybe, absolutely yes.
Awesome! Thanks for your cooperation. Now, let's begin our journey.
Some people are under the illusion that if they use drugs, it's their own private business, that they're only affecting themselves and not hurting anyone else.
But reality is harder and more complex. The drug journey creates a chain reaction that affects the user's close circles, such as family and friends, and the wider circle as well, on the other side of the world.
Welcome to Colombia, a slightly different agricultural superpower. These farmers aren't ordinary farmers. They're growing coca plants from which cocaine is produced. These families live in fear, in conditions that border on slavery. If there weren't people who bought drugs, there wouldn't be people who produce and sell drugs. Don't say you didn't know.
So whoever buys these drugs is ultimately responsible not only for their fate, but for the fate of others.
Next stop is an improvised laboratory, like this one. The recipe is simple and toxic. Spread cement over the dried leaves and mix with gasoline and poisonous fertilizers. These are the substances that will end up in the user's body: cement, gasoline, and fertilizer. The drug's blood trail is getting closer and closer to us. The easy drug money strengthens the drug and crime syndicates. Importing drugs means importing murder, exploitation, and crime to our streets and our schools.
Two teenagers are behind bars right now. This is in Fort Pierce after their teachers caught them with deadly prescription drugs.
Extremely strong prescription medication. They are usually prescribed during end-of-life scenarios to alleviate pain, very strong. And just imagine on a young teenager's body.
Deputies say the pair was caught when trying to sell the drugs to other kids at school.
Police say they were powerful prescription drugs, and some kids who bought them had no idea of the consequences until they ended up in the hospital.
Many of the drug transactions occur on school grounds. 1 in 5 students say that they have been sold, given, or offered drugs on school property. These dealers only want to increase profits and don't care about your health and physical harm the drugs will cause the user. When you buy a drug from a dealer, you have no idea what you're putting into your body and how it will harm you. Let's pause for a moment. During our experience, we will test your alertness and knowledge. Get this, you will be rewarded for your participation. We will have a contest in which the winners will take part in the National Knowledge Competition for a chance to win cool prizes, and I mean really cool prizes. The contest is per person, that's why each of you got a random number that appears on the screen. And it's also a group competition, and today, the ultimate competition, boys against girls. And by the way, boys, with our global average of 2 million participants, girls usually win, so put in a little effort. Basically, anytime you answer correctly, you will be earning points for your team and for yourselves. The number of participants in each team is of no consequence because the computer factors in the percent of right answers, not the amount. So anyone who wants to belong to the boys group, click 1 now. And those who want to belong to the girls group should click on number 2 with a mouse or keyboard.
In the illegal labs, the drugs are refined in a sterile manner, the drugs are mixed with toxins to enhance their effect, innovative measures are used to produce the drug, or all of the above? And the right answer is 2. How do drugs work in our bodies? They are absorbed in the healthy capillaries, in the nasal mucosa, or the small intestine. They reach every part of the body through the vascular system. They disrupt the nervous system and change its functions, or all of the above. All the above are correct. Introducing a drug into our body activates other mechanisms and causes long-term and even permanent changes to brain function and disrupted activation of the respiratory and heart systems. Anyone who buys drugs cannot know where they were produced, what they contain, how they will affect the body, or all of the above. All of the above are correct. Whether the drugs are manufactured in illegal laboratories or meds are illegally distributed, it is impossible to predict exactly how these dangerous substances will affect someone's health. Okay, so let's see the scores. In third place, in second place, in first place. Please note that the position on the scoreboard indicates the number of questions each of you answered correctly and the speed in which the answer was provided. The quickest got double points. And as for the teams, the leading team is...
Okay, well done. We are back. The last stop on the drug journey is the users. It doesn't matter if it's inhaled, swallowed, or injected. Once it enters the body, it's no longer in your control, even if we think it is. Have you ever asked yourselves how our brain works and how drugs affect it? Let's try to understand together.
Our bodies are made up of trillions of cells, thousands of blood vessels, capillaries, tissues, and nerve cells. But what about emotions? Where are the emotions hiding in this complex and sophisticated body of ours? All of our thoughts, our emotions, our decisions, all of them begin and end in the brain. We get upset. We feel happy. We think. And sometimes people just fall in love. I know it doesn't sound all that romantic, but it's all just chemistry and electricity. Processes that occur in the central nervous system in the brain. Here's a question. How does our brain find out when our leg is being tickled? How does it know we should be laughing? Take a look. The feather tickles the foot. The message, "the foot got tickled," travels to the brain through a series of nerve cells. The brain analyzes this information and sends a new message, "laugh." Each of these messages or transfers of information is called a nerve impulse. The incredible thing is that the nerve cells aren't even connected to each other. So how come the electric impulse isn't cut off? This is where the neurotransmitter steps in. This is the chemical substance that transmits the information from one nerve cell to the next. That's how information travels from cell to cell. Just like I said, chemistry and electricity. But besides transferring information between nerve cells, neurotransmitters have another function. In our brain, there are various kinds of neurotransmitters which are each in charge of different feelings and emotions. When we're happy, for example, or scared, or in love, the nerve cells in our brain release neurotransmitters that are responsible for these emotions. One of them is called dopamine.
It is so great to eat good food, wear nice shoes, listen to upbeat music, pat a cute puppy, watch a good movie, play soccer, basketball, or enjoy computer games, and hang out with the people we love.
I feel like we have
Electricity?
chemistry.
So you might ask, if dopamine makes us feel so good, why don't we find a way to release it on purpose? Why shouldn't we feel good all the time? Well, that's a good question. Most drugs take advantage of the body's natural processes. They cause an overflow of dopamine and other neurotransmitters. Great, isn't it? Well, not really. The damage that drugs may cause could be immediate, continuous, and even permanent. Sometimes even from the very first puff or pill. And the feelings of love, happiness, and confidence that they generate, well, they're nothing more than illusions. Marijuana, weed, pot, these are some of the names for drugs made out of a plant called cannabis. No one knows exactly how cannabis affects the brain, and it doesn't affect everyone the same way. But as some of you may know, the feeling it usually creates is called a high. It means it makes people feel dazed, relaxed, and happy. It's fun. But gradually, these feelings make way for a heavy, tired feeling. During the 4 hours after cannabis use, people experience temporary memory loss and a decline in balance and physical fitness. The high usually ends after about 4 to 5 hours, and the user thinks that everything is back to normal and the drug's effect has worn off. It was just a harmless little adventure. So after the high, is everything really back to normal? No.
Scientists are still researching how cannabis, also known as marijuana, grass, a joint, weed, affects the brain. But one thing's for sure, in young people like you, the brain is still developing. Using cannabis at your age could cause irrevocable damage.
We know that about 2% of young people between grades 7 and 12 will use marijuana daily, and it's often these people who are using the marijuana as a coping mechanism for something, whether that be anxiety or depression. We do know there are a number of potential longer-term consequences in terms of brain development and increasing mental health risk for those people who are using marijuana frequently, whether it be daily and in significant quantity.
Despite the user's impression, the active ingredient in the cannabis, THC, continues to affect the user's behavior and perception for 2 or 3 days. THC is a fat-soluble substance, and it takes the body a long time to get rid of it. For people who use pot regularly, this process can take up to 30 days. What happens in the brain of a cannabis user? The human body naturally has neurotransmitters called internal cannabinoids. When a person uses cannabis, the THC replaces the internal cannabinoids and causes the brain to release dopamine. And voila! Instant happiness. Dopamine to go. But unlike internal cannabinoids, THC also has negative effects. When it binds with the neuron receptors, it disrupts the communication between the neurons. And so, cannabis users damage their ability to comprehend and learn, and also their timing and response time.
Okay, let's stop here for a second and go back to the contest so you can score more points. Like ninjas, speed is of essence. Whoever answers more quickly will get additional points that could impact the win.
Whoever uses cannabis before an exam might perform poorly because his short-term memory will be impaired, he'll be too focused, he'll be thirsty, or his hand will shake. The correct answer is 1. THC, the active ingredient in cannabis, impairs the brain's learning and memory functions and can stay in the brain and body of heavy users for longer periods of time. Does cannabis, also known as marijuana, a joint, or weed, only create a slight high? You feel normal again after an hour. It's impossible to know. Sometimes the effect disappears slowly, sometimes quickly. Depends if it's used in the morning or night, or all of the above. The correct answer is 2. It's impossible to know. The side effects differ from person to person. After using cannabis, even when the user feels that he's back to normal, the cannabis still affects his brain. For instance, his capacity to make decisions and his coordination.
And now, a rhetorical question. If illegal drugs are dangerous, why not use substances that are manufactured in recognized and legal labs? What's wrong with medical cannabis? And what's wrong with painkillers that are sold in pharmacies? After all, they're all intended for human use and manufactured in sterile medical labs. These are important questions. Medical cannabis and painkillers don't cure diseases, they just relieve suffering. And whoever takes them, like people with chronic diseases or cancer, have no choice. But you teens, you have a choice. Taking these substances just for a few moments of fake and temporary chemical pleasure isn't worth the risk of addiction and causing damage to your body. Online drug sales, illegitimate online pharmacies, and shady websites are highly accessible to the tech-savvy teens. These sites facilitate millions of transactions and generate easy profits for the criminals. To facilitate distribution, they will quote studies by people with a vested interest or quote renowned scientists, but they will take things out of context. Identifying the domain type is a good start. EDU, educational source. GOV, government source. ORG, nonprofit source. Always check who published it, whether they are legit and reliable. So let's have a little contest to identify true and fake. And yes, the correct answers will add points to you and your team. 1 is true and 2 is fake.
Drugs produced from plants and not chemicals in a lab are healthy and safe. True or fake? Fake. Smoking a joint is just as damaging as smoking a regular cigarette. True or fake? Fake. Smoking cannabis, also known as a joint, leaves 4 times more tar in the lungs than a regular cigarette and contains up to 70% more malignant chemicals. Cannabis, also known as marijuana, a joint, weed, and more, isn't addictive. Therefore, it's not really harmful. True or fake? Fake. Half the patients at rehab centers and the Youth Probation Service are teens on the spectrum of addiction to cannabis. Some use it as a primary drug, and some as a secondary drug. Using cannabis can harm sexual performance and fertility among teens. True or fake? True. The effect of cannabis on adults is not the same as the effect on teens. True or fake? True. The effect of cannabis on teens is more acute.
And from the fake, let's move on to the truths and learn more about drugs and cannabis.
What else does cannabis do? Sometimes it causes anxiety and panic attacks. These attacks may include a dry feeling in the mouth, paranoid thoughts, an increased heart rate, and even a sense of paralysis. People who are unaware of their susceptibility to panic attacks suddenly feel like they're about to go crazy. And some actually do.
Marijuana use during adolescence can lead to serious long-term cognitive impairment and an increased risk of severe psychiatric disorders, according to new research from the lab of Dr. Asaf Keller at the University of Maryland School of Medicine.
Children who start around pre-adolescence, 13 to 15 years of age, tend to develop very severe deficits, and these include a very high incidence of neuropsychiatric disorders like schizophrenia and attention deficit disorders, as well as long-term and permanent reductions in intelligence as measured by IQ tests.
In the USA, there are states where usage has been legalized, and data was recently published that with the legalization, there has been a 300% increase of teens in hospital ERs.
These materials are usually mistakenly considered to be harmless materials. However, the fumes of these inhalants quickly travel from the lungs to the blood. At first, they create a feeling of elation, giddiness, and euphoria, chemical emotions. But after a short while, from minutes to an hour, other feelings arise. The inhalants are toxins. The body futilely tries to break them down. That's how users damage their liver and kidneys, their heart, and their brain and nervous system.
There are many innocuous products sold in supermarkets that can give the illusion of something safe and harmless, but they are very dangerous. In fact, 22% of inhalant abusers who died of sudden sniffing death syndrome had no history of previous inhalant abuse. They were first-time users.
It is a dangerous high that is killing teenagers. This is 17-year-old Hope's story, told by her mom.
easy, accessible way to get high.
And I heard it. I heard the desk go off, and I heard her like, breathe it in.
I said, I hope if you continue to do this, you're going to die. It's going to kill you. And she grabbed me and she hugged me and she said, Mom, I'm never going to die.
But she did. Lori found Hope dead in her bedroom.
I just thought about it just the other day, about how, she was able to get that can back in her bag. But then she never recovered from that.
A lot will say they've done it once, maybe twice, and then there'll be some that, everybody in the school knows, oh yeah, he huffs pain all the time. And those people, unfortunately, like I said, they can have devastating consequences.
The active ingredient in ecstasy is called MDMA. It stimulates, causes hallucinations. It doesn't affect everyone the same way, but usually taking ecstasy starts out with a good mood. A lot of energy, a sense of relaxation, love for everyone, and a heightened sensitivity of the senses. Do you think that's funny? Yeah, me too. But in many cases, ecstasy has very serious consequences. Nausea, dizziness, obscured thought, and tooth grinding. And if you use ecstasy while dancing, well, dehydration too. Why is that? Sometimes ecstasy suppresses the feeling of thirst, and then the user just doesn't drink enough water and gets dehydrated. Sometimes the opposite happens. The user is constantly thirsty and drinks too much. And drinking too much causes edemas in the brain and the lungs. That can cause a blackout. But the most significant long-term effect of ecstasy is the way it causes the brain to malfunction. Ecstasy may cause neurons to degenerate, so regular ecstasy users gradually lose their ability to feel pleasure. So we've seen that anyone who lets drugs into their body lets them into their brain. Drugs affect memory and one's sex life. Drugs affect motivation and a person's ability to control themselves and many other important things. In short, they affect life and death.
18-year-old Teslyn Russell was found dead in her family's home on December 30th.
It's like she kneeled down and went to sleep, and it didn't make any sense to me at all.
Senseless because she went from being perfectly healthy to found dead on the family's bathroom floor.
A mother's story of loss is one of many ways a major forum helped to inform local people about the effects and dangers of addiction.
I lost somebody I loved. From my standpoint, because
Anita Muhammad is turning grief and guilt into good, bad as it may still feel.
I ignored it for a long time, thinking it would just work itself out in time, because I didn't realize the seriousness of it.
Just over 2 months ago, the daughter she knew well in some ways,
a beautiful young lady, heart of gold,
had been battling an opioid addiction until the addiction eventually won.
I felt like I could have done a lot more, but there's nothing I can do about that now.
Today we presented you with facts. Maybe some were familiar to you. The internet is full of erroneous information. And in this age of fake news, we must be twice as wary of information that could harm our health. So let's see what information you acquired here today, and who the 3 outstanding knowledge ninjas among you are. Remember, the contest is both an individual and team effort. Our scoreboard will show which team is in the lead and who the top 3 contestants are.
Okay, so let's see the scores. In 3rd place, in 2nd place, in 1st place. And as for the teams, the leading team is...
But don't despair, it's still anyone's game. And here are the next questions.
Long-term use of inhalants such as air duster, spray paint, gasoline, or markers causes bad breath and increased sweating, damage to the nervous system and the immune system, brain damage and psychotic diseases, impairs the ability to solve problems, or answers 2 and 3 are correct. The correct answer is 4. Frequent use of inhalants introduces toxins in the body and is liable to damage physical and emotional development and cause major learning difficulties. What happens when a drug is used on a regular basis? The body and brain get used to it and crave it. The brain expands, and that's dangerous. The effect lessens, therefore the user increases the dose, or answers 1 and 3 are correct. Answers 1 and 3 are correct. Use of cannabis could cause decreased motivation to perform tasks, the risk of addiction to drugs in adulthood, anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts during adolescence, or all of the above. All of the above.
We'll pause here for a moment and ask you how you feel about diverse questions pertaining to drugs. There is no wrong or right answer, and don't forget, your answers are anonymous. No one will know what you replied, so choose the answer that suits you and try to provide honest answers.
From 1 to 4, to what extent do you agree or disagree with the following sentences? Totally disagree, somewhat disagree, somewhat agree, or absolutely agree. Any drug can be dangerous. Whoever uses drugs only hurts himself and not others. I won't use a drug if I know it will cause me physical and emotional damage. It's none of my business if my friends use drugs.
Thought-provoking, huh? What do you say? Did you know that this is what your team thinks? Let's get back to the knowledge contest. To enhance the suspense, we are going to hide your team score from now on. It is time to cook up a surprise for the competition. And now, true or false questions. Press 1 if you think the sentence is true, and press 2 if you think it's false.
Since cannabis, known as marijuana, weed, and more, is prescribed by a doctor, that means it's not dangerous. True or false? False. In the few states where the law permits personal use of cannabis, use is prohibited under the age of 21. True or false? True.
That's it! We're done! But before we announce the winners, we'll ask you a few questions before the program begins. We want to know if your opinion has changed as a result of your participation in the program. So please provide honest answers.
How risky is it for people your age to use drugs? No risk, low risk, moderate risk, or high risk? What happens when you take drugs? You become happy, nothing, you become sad, or they affect everyone differently? How long does the effect of cannabis last? Less than 8 hours, up to 24 hours, up to 7 days, or up to 30 days? Are you going to use cannabis in the future? Absolutely yes, maybe, or absolutely not. If you find out that your brother or sister is using cannabis, will you be concerned it could harm their relationship with your parents? No, maybe, absolutely yes. Did you get information you were unaware of before this activity? No, a little, or a lot? Has your attitude towards drugs changed as a result of this activity? No, somewhat, my objection has increased, or my objection has increased very much. Do you think that dealing with issues that are meaningful to teens with an activity such as this one is interesting? Yes, a little, or not really?
That's it. The contest has come to an end. Now we'll reveal the winners. First, who's in the lead of the individual contest?
The 3 contestants that got the highest scores are in 3rd place, in 2nd place, and in 1st place. And finally, which team answered the most questions correctly? It's time to find out that the winning team is team number 1. Way to go!
What do you think, Does a shortcut to happiness really exist? You decide. Be happy when there's a reason. Dance without taking anything first. Be yourself and have faith. It's your greatest gift. Smile. It's a big world and it's no big deal. Fall in love with the wonderful person you meet. And when you are lonely, be your own best friend.
And most important, take care of yourselves. After all, the good things really happen when you're alive. Thanks for participating. See you on another of our special journeys on other interesting topics.